Parenting. In one way, it's the easiest thing in the world. There's only a few major principles that you need to follow. And at the same time, it's the hardest because your emotions can so much get in the way, either because you get frustrated or because you love your kid too much or you're just overwhelmed with life. There's a certain humility that I'm going to bring to this discussion. I don't want you to think because I'm saying there's really only a few basic principles that are required and a few critical incidents in parenting that you need to get right, it helps if you get right, that I think it's easy. First, I want to try to make you a little more relaxed about it. We are learning that ever more of who we are is genetic, and there was a wonderful award-winning book and research that came out a while ago that found that actually peer influence is more important than parents. So much as we like to think that everything we do as a parent is going to be critical, in fact, it's simply not true. In the extremes, of course, if you're tying your child up and beating them all the time, unpredictably at random and going off on tantrums, it's going to be a problem. Or if you're wildly indulgent at all times, as kids, you and the kid are saying, "Hey, let's toke together, let's get high." Clearly, that's not going to be good. But short of that, what you do is not that critical. I want to say the few principles that, and what I'm going to say here is is pretty much mainstream. The first thing that nearly every expert agrees that corporal punishment, hitting your kid, is an absolute no-no. Why? First of all, it only gains short-term compliance. What happens is you scare the hell out of the kid behaves short-term, but long-term, your kid is more likely to be rejecting you because you can't keep hitting the kid forever, and it creates an oppositional relationship between you and your kid. No good. And it also teaches your kid that violence is an appropriate way to respond. So take that off the table. Whatever it is that you're going to do in terms of rewards, punishments, guilt invocation, whatever, you are not going to hit your kid. I'll break your face. That's a joke. So that's principle one. Principle two, and this is a bit contrarian. Guilt has been associated with bad parenting, unhappiness. People have gone into therapy for a zillion years, feeling guilt and shame that their parents perpetrated upon them. Well, and it's also been the butt of a lot of jokes about Jewish parents. Yeah, go ahead, do what you want. I'll just put my head in the oven, kind of jokes. But the truth is that guilt, invocation of guilt by parents, is a very potent and legitimate and healthy approach to parenting as a tool, as a response, as maybe even the first response to misbehavior. Let me try to explain why through the typical example of a kid who misbehaves, doesn't clean up the room when they said they would, comes home late when they said they were, even smoking weed, whatever. The standard advice is to avoid guilt invocation and give it a reward for good behavior, punish for bad behavior, hit the kid, time out. No. In most cases, and of course one size does not fit all, every kid's a little different, but the first line of defense against misbehavior would be, let's say you called Johnny twice to come to the dinner table. "Mommy, I want to watch more TV!" And he refuses to come in. In general, the wisest approach, if you can pull on ropes of restraint and feel and be your best self, would be to say something like, "Johnny, I know you're better than this. You're a part of this family, and we need you at the table. I can't force you. I'm not going to pick you up and throw you into the chair. But I know you're better than this, and I'll be disappointed if you don't come." And then just walk away. And then if the kid comes back 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, says, "I'm hungry," say, we're in the middle of dinner. If you want to come to the table now, either okay, or it's appropriate to give a little punishment. Say, you embarrassed me and were not a good member of the family when you chose to not come to the table. So You're going to have to eat after we're done. We're not going to get up and, create something special for you. Now, I'm not saying you always need to do that, but the reason guilt works so well is it builds intrinsic motivation. The guilt makes the person feel like they were not being their best self. I didn't say, you're a terrible kid, you're always going to grow up to be a loser. I didn't do any of that. I said that you made a mistake. You did not fulfill your role as a family member, and I'm disappointed in you. That tends to build more intrinsic motivation so that when the kid is on his own or later on the next week, the next day, whatever, the kid is more likely intrinsically to feel, oh, I really, I can be. I'm really am better than that. I should be a more grown-up kid and show up at the dinner table. Nothing works all the time. I'm not saying it works all the time. But when day is done, when parenting is done after 18 or 30 years or whatever, your child will be more intrinsically motivated to behave well, do the right thing, for internal reasons, because when that kid goes off to college, you're not going to be there to issue rewards and punishment. It's going to be laissez-faire time with all the kids in the dorm having, a good old time, even if it's not in their best interest. So the goal in parenting is to build intrinsic motivation. So that, that along with no corporal punishment are two critical, important rules. A third basic principle, and there are really not a lot, is where possible, sometimes you're just too busy, you don't have time for this or whatever, but in general, you want to be the voice of reason. You want to give a reason for why, and it can be very brief. I'm not talking about long lectures. Long lectures don't work. Who knows, maybe this 28.5-minute lecture is not going to work, but this is what this radio show is. I'm giving you my best. In any case, a long lecture to your child is usually not going to work, but a short explanation, even if it's a phrase or a sentence, can make clear that you're not being an arbitrary parent. Why should you come to the dinner table? Because I said so. No. Because it's really great when families can count on night in and night out, we're going to be together, with exceptions when there's, an emergency, your dad or your mom have to be out of town, on business or whatever. But in general, we want to try to have family dinner every night because even if night after night we don't have any really important conversations, it's a space where we know that that's what that's there for, and it's a nice ritual. So that was about 2 or 3 sentences, maybe a little longer than it needed to be. But giving that reason, again, builds intrinsic motivation. It builds the valuing of reason rather than arbitrariness. Power plays where the parent just tries to exert power because I'm the grown-up. I've had more experience than you have. Any of that stuff is teaching the wrong lessons. You want to be doing your kid to be doing the right thing because it's the right thing. Let me give the drug example because it's very vivid in my mind, because as a career counselor, I can't tell you how many people's lives have been ruined simply from weed. The loss of memory, loss of motivation. There's recent data that it shows increase in social anxiety and proclivity even to severe psychotic stuff like schizophrenia. And this is not reefer madness conservative stuff. This is the relative, we're all biased in some ways, but the research that comes out of our most prestigious universities, not the advocacy groups who are saying, weed! So if my kid, let's say I smelled marijuana in his room, or I saw his stash or whatever, I would probably, and again, keep it short, I'd probably start by saying, can I give you a hug? And I'd start there. It lays a foundation of, this is not about being oppositional, not about exerting control because I'm the dad. It comes from a position of love and caring. So I would say something like, Johnny, and of course it could be Janie, Johnny, I did smell weed in your room. And this is a tough issue for me because I see how many lives are ruined. I know when kids are young, you think you're impervious. If I had a bright kid, I'd use impervious. If not, that, nothing bad can happen to you. But especially as a teenager, the evidence is really clear that the brain doesn't fully form until 25, and you could be creating permanent damage like loss of IQ points. Major study in New Zealand said that. Increased cancer risk, cardiovascular risk. The cancer risk is not clear. And see, I would tell my kid that. But risk of heart attacks, early heart attacks, they were finding even young people. Losing your motivation. You're a good student in school. I don't want you to lose it. Your brain is maybe your most important organ. So I want to shut up there, but I want to tell you that I'm sad and I'm worried. And I'm hoping that you won't do weed. I know other kids do. So Johnny, don't BS me. Tell me the truth. How are you really reacting to this plea to be more grown up and more mature? So that's kind of what I would say, that because this is a major issue. That would be the kind of thing that I would say. Again, respectfully, with love, citing evidence, but also feelings. I like to think that represents a good balance. Now let's see if there's. I don't think there's any other really core principles. Oh yeah, one of the things a good parent does is they set up environmental things that are likely to build for success in the kid. So one would be, yes, from the earliest age, even at birth, to be talking to your child, looking to your child, holding the child. It builds security, builds language. They're taking in language even from the very, very beginning. An atmosphere that generally tends to be filled with praise rather than criticism. Do look for the positive, but not gratuitous praise. The kid who's been a wild kid and he's throwing temper tantrums or whatever, and he's good for 5 seconds, saying, "Oh, what a good boy you are, Johnny," feels disingenuous, and the kid, even at a young age, is going to know that. But you want to have a home environment that generally errs toward the positive, and putting your kid in environments that are going to work for that kid. If your kid is a hyperactive boy, you're not going to get him to sit and do his homework as soon as he comes home from school. You've got to give him or her a chance to run around, to play, and say, "I understand. You've been your butt's been in that chair in school all day. Do you want to go out? You want to play? What do you want to do? You need some freedom." And if the kid is not athletic but bookish, that's fine. Say, "I want to read a book, or I want to watch a little TV, or I want to play a video game." That's fine. Please go ahead. You deserve a little time to relax. So there's an erring. You're clearly on the same side of the table as your kid. You're being humanistic in general. That doesn't mean that you don't set limits. And different kids need different amounts of limits. I was very fortunate to have a child, my daughter Amy, who was very self-monitoring, and if anything was too diligent. So, I had to set almost no limits for her whatsoever. From, telling her, asking her when are you going to do your homework? She basically did her own homework on her own. And, I didn't need to set a curfew because she was just very responsible. I felt it was disrespectful of a kid like that to impose limits just because that's the standard thing to do. One size does not fit all. So in general, you're trying to err on the positive side, but recognize that every kid is different. Some kids are always going to test the limits. And then with a kid like that, it is your responsibility to set reasonable limits and sometimes be quite firm about it. Because sometimes if you're too lax and let it go, the kid's going to keep pushing the limits, and now you got a real problem, kid. On the other hand, because everything is about nuance, it's never black and white. You don't want to nail your kid to the cross every time he screws up or she screws up, even if he violates the limits. Let's say you've got a kid who tends to be oppositional. And the kid, you say, "You've got to be home 6 o'clock for dinner." And it's now 6:20, and the kid saunters in and tosses his basketball down in the living room and, whatever. Sometimes you're going to want to say, "Johnny, you promised." And promises mean a lot in this family. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to your reputation in general to keep your word. And you didn't, and so I'm disappointed. And then shut up. But sometimes you don't have the energy for that. You've worked all day. You're tired. You want to go home. You want to relax. You're not in the mood for even a brief lecture. So sometimes all you need to do is purse your lips a little bit. And that's it. The kid, if he's looking at you and you want him to be looking at you, you can purse your lips while he's looking at you. That gets to the point, of course, without any long lectures. In fact, the shorter, the better. That brings up another little tip that I'd like to mention here. Sometimes a way of avoiding the long lecture thing is, let's say you and your child agreed that he or she is not going to curse in the house. It's not one of my big issues. I don't particularly care about that a whole lot, although the reason to encourage kids not to curse is that in public, generally people tend to disparage those who use curse words a lot. Not that it matters to me. I think that's the least of all sins. But let's say we agreed that to try to cut down his cursing. Rather than a lecture each time he said shit or whatever, we'd make an agreement that I would just provide a little feedback. So every time he said, fuck or shit or whatever, I'd simply raise my finger for a second so he saw it. So he gets the message without the long lecture. The finger up is a really good technique. It's not only good in parenting, actually with your romantic partner. There's always going to be some things each of you are trying to work on. And instead of giving your partner a big lecture when they, for example, leave their underwear on the floor, you might just, with that little smile, not mean, but, a little bit of that kind of look and the finger up gets the point across without a long lecture. All right. Now, this is a good time for me to let you know you are listening to How to Do Life. I am Marty Nemko. Okay, now I want to turn to chronologically critical incidents in parenting and how these principles might be applied. So let's start with the baby. Your infant or baby just won't stop crying. Here you've got to play diagnostician. Sometimes babies just cry for no reason, and you can be the greatest diagnostician this side of T. Berry Brazelton and Dr. Spock. And I'm not talking about the Star Trek one. I'm talking about Benjamin Spock, the baby book, author of the baby book. But sometimes you just won't cry. But other times, I know it's frustrating. You probably have worked a long day, and now you're listening to baby go and will not stop. If you can, try to take that deep breath or two and try to play good diagnostician. What's the most likely reason? Could your kid be hungry? Could your kid need a diaper change? Could your kid need more, just put them in a crib? Does the kid need to be rocked and held and walked? Is the kid sick? Most rarely it's that. Occasionally it's that. But don't jump to that too quickly. Sometimes parents are so worried about, being the great parent that they jump to the doctor too quickly. Really, most times it's something lesser than that. It's usually something that isn't, serious, even if it's, as they say, idiopathic is what the docs say. We don't know what's causing it. Give it some time. If you need some alone time, of course, you can't deal with that nonstop screaming for hours, and sometimes that happens. I'm not screaming, but crying for hours. It's really difficult for a parent. So sometimes it is wise to just put your baby down in where the baby sleeps with soft music, lights low, and using, if you can, your calm voice. Say, Mommy or Daddy really always loves you. It's okay. It's okay. And you stroke the kid's head a little bit, and then sometimes, it'll slow down or stop. Of course, if it doesn't after a while and you play diagnostician, you've tried the different things, it's not working, then, I guess it may be a time to call your healthcare provider. And again, these days, it's very often not a doctor. It could be your nurse practitioner, physician assistant, whatever. Anyway, so that's the very first in the chronology. Now, the next kind of critical moment is in toddlerhood. They call them the terrible twos for a reason, because kids are testing the limits and they want to see if they can get their way by throwing tantrums. So they might yell and scream, throw things, get on the floor and, pound away and whatever. And even just by giving attention, you're rewarding that. That attention is a reward in itself. Again, we're not always perfect, but the best thing you can do if, let's say you say, no dessert for today, you were at the dinner table, you were throwing your food, so no dessert for you. I'm disappointed in your behavior. That was both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic, I'm disappointed in you. Extrinsic is no dessert. And he then, or she, goes on the floor and pounds away the floor. I hate you! That kind of stuff. The best thing you can do is say, that's not going to work. You'll be a lot happier if you stop. So it's up to you. And then ignore. And if you've got other siblings, if you've got other children, encourage your children to ignore it and not give the kid any attention. Even yelling at the kid is attention. Best thing you can do, if you can control yourself, is to ignore it. Next critical moment is homework. Everybody is 95% of kids, not my daughter, but me included. I did not like homework, and most kids don't like homework. And really, your kid is not going to succeed or fail in life if he or she doesn't do homework regularly or whatever. But it does fall upon the parent to be the homework police officer. So normally, the best way to deal with this is a little ounce of prevention, is to have a discussion with your kid. Given every year is a little different when there's a little more or less homework. So saying to your kid, okay, how can we figure out this homework thing so that it's least painful for you, and so you can learn something and get good grades. That's why you do homework, to establish some discipline, get good grades, and maybe learn something and reinforce something that you were taught in school. So see, again, I'm giving a reason. I'm not just saying you got to do it because you got to do the homework, or just for the grades. I'm trying to build the intrinsic motivation about learning and responsibility. But I also want to be clear that I'm on the kid's side, that it doesn't need to be oppositional. It's, hey, what should we do? Do you want to do the homework right after school and get it over with? Do you need to get to get some energy out and play for a while and go out? When will you still be fresh? I would recommend, dear child, that normally it's better to do it before dinner, because after dinner we have what's called food coma. We get more tired or whatever, and we don't feel like tired, both because it's later in the day and because we've had the meal in us. It's normally better to do the homework either right after school or sometime before dinner. So what do you want to make as your regular homework time? And let the kid choose if possible. And then you might give another choice, and that's another good tactic that parents can use. It's giving them two choices, both of which are acceptable. Do you want to do it right after school? Or do you want to do it before dinner? Do you want to do it in your room, or would you like to do it in the kitchen near the kitchen table in the same room as me? Those are reasonable choices. Do you want to try it with music on, soft music on? Do you want to try it without? Giving pairs of choices gives the kid some sense of choice, power, and the kid may indeed choose the thing that is going to work better for him or her. That two choices thing works really well. I remember that with my daughter, we lived in New York, and it was cold, and my kid didn't like putting on her snowshoes, her snowsuit. So instead of saying you gotta, we said, would you like to wear the red snowsuit or the blue snowsuit? Oh, I want the blue. So sometimes giving choice is a way to avoid an argument. Useful technique. Okay, and homework. Another where homework becomes problematic is when the kid reaches a hard part. Mommy, it's too hard. I can't do it. So you can either, if you feel like that's just a ploy, give the little school marmy look. And don't say a word. You don't need to give a lecture. But sometimes if it really is hard, you might take a quick look if you've got the bandwidth to do it, and just give enough help to get the kid over the hump. That suggests that the power does reside in the kid. The kid has the agency, and yet it doesn't mean he or she has to do it all by himself. Sometimes everybody needs a little help now and then. So I think that's all I want to say about homework. Now we get to, we did the drug thing. That was another critical moment. Let's do the sex thing. Let's take the initial sex conversation. It could be as young as 7 or 8, sometimes 10. And the kid is talking about the stork, or where do I come from? Or a kid told me that, babies come from daddy's doing weird things to mommy, or whatever the kid says. And usually that's the best time to bring it up, is when the kid is bringing the topic up. That way you're more sure the timing is right. And so, you want to keep it pretty brief in the beginning and leave space for the kid to then ask questions or not. So it could be as simple as, I know you hear a lot of talk about that from kids, but I got to tell you, as a grown-up, I've had a little more experience in that area. And here's how babies come. When a mommy and a daddy want to have a child, they lie very close to each other, and And part of that they exchange a little fluid, and that ends up making a baby, and that baby grows in the mommy's belly, and then 9 months later, out comes the baby. Do you have any questions about that? Anything you want to know? I'll then respond with questions or whatever, and I use a fairly matter-of-fact tone. And then there are some excellent books that are written for kids at different ages. I think one of the best is something called "It's Not the Stork." So you might then say, I got you this book. I'll put it next to your bed. Read it if and when you feel like it, and if you have any questions, I'm always here to answer it. So I think that kind of matter-of-fact tone. But let's say this is not just all, let's say you think your kid is 14 or 15 years old and is sexually active. Let's say that, you don't know for sure, but you think the kid, so you say, it seems like you're getting pretty close to your boyfriend. And of course, this could occur either gender, and it could be homosexual versus heterosexual. Sexual fluidity is in. I understand. You would say, I'll role play both sides. So you seem to be very, very close with Kyle these days. Yeah, he's all right. I notice you close the bedroom door a lot when you're here. Ma, leave me alone. I'm entitled to some privacy. You say, I understand. I just want you to know that I'm here. I know these at your age, it can be pretty complicated, difficult, scary, whatever, to be intimate, touching with your boyfriend, girlfriend. And I want you to know that I'm really here for you. And if you would like to talk about it now or down in the future, I'm here to talk about all the complexities. So don't worry, I'm not going to beat you up. And I would smile. Clearly, I'm joking, but it lets her know I'm serious. And I try to let my kid take the lead. They probably will say, "Nah, everything's fine," but you've laid the foundation, you've planted a seed for down the road. I don't have time to talk about the other final major moment in parenting, which is in choosing a college and choosing a career. So I'll just simply say, kids get so, I would ask I'll say the one thing. Don't let your kid prostitute himself to get into a better brand name college, because in fact, on average, the quality of the education is often worse. The value of the designer label is not that great as to justify prostituting yourself. It's a bad lesson to teach your kid that it's worth doing the things you don't want to do, overwhelming your schedule, doing crew and serving soup to the homeless when that's not what you really want to do, taking the SAT 5 times merely so you can get into a more designer label college. Moderation, in fact, community colleges are the most underrated of all, and that is all the time we have. So I would like to end today's show, as I end all of them, by reminding you that we do find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't.